Welcome to Podcast Circle. I am the creator and host, Alex Hitt. On each episode of Podcast Circle, we bring together a group of entrepreneurs and business owners to have roundtable discussions about our experiences building and running businesses today. While I host and moderate the conversation, the views and opinions expressed by each guest are their own. I do not endorse any products, services, or advice shared on the podcast unless explicitly stated. With that said, let's jump into our introduction so you know who has joined us today.
Lorenz, Top Floor Mentoring, topfloormentoring.com.
Jacob Michaels, Life on a Lens Media, LOL Media, LLC.com.
Mark Herre, SEO Game, SEOgame.com.
Amy Calder, Valenta, Wisconsin, us.valenta.io.
Evan Mestman, ProAttitudes, ProAttitudes.com.
Burt Levy, Kumo Partners, Chicago, KumoPartners.com.
Sandra Connor, Video Grows, VideoGrows.com.
Roelf Woldring, The Right Talent, the-right-talent.ca.
And the topic of discussion today is, how important is networking in your entrepreneurial journey, and what strategies do you use to build meaningful connections? Laura, would you please start us off?
Networking is integral to my businesses. I've started 3, and over the years, I have found that almost any kind of marketing does not work as well as networking. I use networking for connections, to get referrals, but mostly to meet really good people and learn from people. So my strategy in making connections is really to learn about them, to see what they know, to see how we can help each other and how we can be resources for each other, and then maintain those relationships over time.
Networking is very important for my entrepreneurial journey. It's pretty much been 90% of my business over the last 6 years. We've only just started running ads literally in the last couple of years. Networking is so important because it allows you to shake the hand of the person that you're actually dealing with. And even in the virtual space like this, a virtual handshake is just as good anymore. There's something so great about being able to go out and form a relationship that grows, develops, and leads to a win-win-win situation basically for you and them.
So networking is critical for my business. As I can tell in the current times, email campaigns, cold calls just aren't resulting in much response. And what I've learned, and actually there was an article that kind of put a point to it, is that the buyers are changing to millennial buyers. They're getting younger and they don't want to be sold to. They want to know someone. They want to know more about you. They want to have the know, like, and trust. So networking really is that avenue to connect to those buyers. In addition to being part of purposeful business networking groups, I also do quite a bit of volunteering and have found that I find interesting introductions in that arena that really can lead to great relationships that build the business.
I came to networking only recently when I started this career as an entrepreneur. I was in medical devices for many years, 20 years, and I didn't have to do this kind of networking. So it was all a awakening on my part. And I found that a lot of networking was transactional. I learned the hard way that it doesn't really work. You don't want to be interesting. You want to be interested. So I've learned that it's about building those relationships, about really, truly thinking about how can you connect with people and serve them, give them something of value. And the strategies that I'm using now actually involve reaching people that I never would in my circles if it was just person to person. And I find it really fascinating working with technology, AI, to be able to reach people that are all over the world and that are not typically in my circle. And it's really where most of my business comes from. So it's truly important to have a networking strategy as well as don't make it transactional, make it about relationships.
I use 2 basic concepts in networking. One is make a sale, earn a commission, make a friend, earn a fortune. And the other is it's not about who you know, it's who knows you. And I think networking is critical because anytime somebody wants to spend time with you to learn about why you are the way you are, that is an absolute gift. And the one strategy I've done over the years is I remove the linear component from my networking. Meaning I don't look at somebody, ask if they can become a client, and then decide whether or not to meet with them. I meet with them no matter what they do, whether they can become a client of mine or not. I do not even think like that. I meet with them to learn and understand about their journey and to share mine with them. People spend too much time judging the package and they miss the gift. So I never judge the package. And what the gift is each one of our respective networks and all the tentacles that extend out into the real world. That's the gift, and that's what we're able to share and hopefully have shared with us from others. But I really always believe that if you give more than you take in life, you get back more than you give. And I think it's important to approach networking from a servant mentality, not what you can do for me, but what I can do for you. And if you approach from that mentality, I think you're going to have a great experience meeting people.
Over the years, I have found that there are two key components to networking. One, you cannot assume that the people you meet know how to network. There must be an element of education in there somewhere. And especially those of us who came from corporate America and were always had a manager who told us what to do, how to do, even if we didn't agree with it. Networking is a different strategy and animal to the business piece, especially when you come at it from the perspective of being a business owner. The second thing, for those of us who are introverts and hide it well, often, networking takes a level of energy that not everyone recognizes. So we have to be more intentional and purposeful about how we choose and the tactics we choose to put toward networking effectively. Fortunately, I figured that out for me, but it took a long time.
In the last 20 years that I spent as a turnaround executive leader in organizations, I never networked. I met so many people I didn't have to network. That came to an end, and I suddenly had to learn how to network. I'd never learned how to do that before. So I spent a year and a half on various kinds of platforms networking with people, one-on-ones. And I always asked, what's your networking strategy? How successful is it for you? And I learned a lot from those folks. One of the things I learned is if you network in places where your potential targets are, you make a lot of friends, but no business. The second thing I learned was if you don't have a networking strategy, if you don't know who you're looking for, you meet a lot of interesting people, but you get no business. And the last thing I learned is if your networking is about sales, you don't get a lot of business. Networking, once you find the right platform, is about getting to know people, figuring out how, as Burt said, you can be a servant to them and how, in return, they can be a servant to you in terms of referring you to the right people with the right problems, which eventually lead to business.
Some of the things that I picked up on was networking is not about selling, right? Having a strategy is critically important to what you're doing. If you're just networking with random people and you're not tracking it or you're not gathering people's information to follow up, right? That was one thing that I don't know if we talked about is following up with people and how important that is, not to just network with somebody one time and then never talk to them again and think that they're going to come around and remember you. That's not really how it happens. But what are some of the themes or some of the ideas that you guys had when everybody else was contributing?
I like to say that as I was listening to everyone had a different perspective and where they were in their journey of networking. And it was interesting to hear all those perspectives. As a longtime networker in person, I never was able to fill a calendar. And it's only just now that if I'm intentional, then I can fill a calendar. If I stop being intentional, I have too much space and too much time to probably not do business like I should.
You know, I found it not interesting because we network with best people in the world, but we all said that it is about relationships, that it is not transactional, and it is about the continuation of those relationships. It's not a once and done, and now you're going to get a million referrals or connections. The other thing that I found that was very interesting is we all said come at it from servant's heart and that it's all about giving and not taking.
Yeah, some interesting thoughts on that. Even sometimes in H7, everybody wants to find the room that's right for them. And what's a good meeting to go to? What's good for me? I try to think of groups that I can be good for. You know, what am I going to bring to the group to make it better? And that's a different way to look. Again, most people look at, well, what's good for me? How could this group benefit me? And I really try to bring a different mentality to that entire process. And with regard to follow-up, I am not 100% perfect, but for the most part, if I have any type of one-on-one with you or any type of meeting, I always write a follow-up note. And it's just a respect and a courtesy for people's time. But it doesn't always work that way. And then the other thing is, if you really get deep into connecting, you have to keep track of who you met, who introduced you, who did you introduce to, because I think it's really important. Otherwise, it gets sloppy. And the worst thing you could do is ask somebody for an introduction to somebody you've already met. It doesn't make the person who's making the introduction look good. It doesn't make the person who's asking for it look good.
There's a big difference between one-on-one networking and community building. One of the things about the H7 network is that it's focused on community building. If you're focused on community building, You approach the way you network very differently if you're focused on, let me meet another interesting person, let me build a relationship with another person one-on-one.
Yeah, I would just say it is a skill. It is something that you have to hone over time. And I think that this team or group that's assembled today has some training that has helped us kind of understand that the servant side is the better approach. But I think in general, especially as you leave corporate America, that's a skill that you need to build and to figure out how you're going to go about it. And so I appreciate there are opportunities to learn, but I don't know that it's innate, and it is something you have to develop.
Just to reiterate what everybody else has said, it resonates with me that we all need a process. Yeah, there's a way to do this, but if you're not actually tracking it, you're not actually looking at, well, why are you doing this to begin with? And incorporating it into your sales process, not to sell, but to understand how can you improve your technique? How can you improve your behavior? How can you change your attitude so that you're going to be more successful, but you're also providing all that value with building these relationships? Because that's really what it's all about, right? Having relationships with others because you can't do it yourself.
That's a wrap for Podcast Circle. Thank you to all of our guests for sharing their insights today. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe wherever you're listening. Also, head over to my website, alexhitt.com, to find additional resources, attend upcoming online events, and to apply to be the next guest on Podcast Circle.